Hello and welcome to this video demonstration of how to assemble the Estes Flash Rocket Kit. So the rocket kit itself will come in a relatively modest sized box as shown here. I just picked mine up today. And inside of the box you will find the following items wrapped up in plastic bags. You'll find the instructions along with the warranty information. We'll find the launch platform equipment, including the launch blast disc and then the tripod legs for the platform. You'll find the launch guiding rail folded up in here. And then the rocket itself, its primary components will be found in here. Since everything is bagged up in plastic bags, the first thing you'll need to do, of course, will be to remove all of those items. And so one item of use that you might find is a pair of scissors. So just carefully cut open the bag to make sure you keep the plastic safely confined. Remove the items in the bag. I like to make sure that my plastic wrapping is kept neatly contained so that none of it goes blowing away. You'll want, of course, to have the instructions, so we will open up this bag as well. The instructions you will find come in multiple languages, so assuming that English is your primary language, you will, of course, want to use the instructions that are in English. But if your primary language is in one of a number of others, you may luck out and find that that language will be included in the instructions as well. So we remove that information from that plastic bag. We have a parts listing in English here. So this is the English instructions. Parts listing, you open it up. On the second page is the start of the instructions for assembling, and then page 3 continues those instructions all the way to preparing the engine for launch at your launch site. And then the last page of the instructions will have the instructions specific for launching and safely recovering your rocket. You'll also find the instructions for assembling your launch pad in here on both sides. And here is my safety instructions, along with how to install and use the launch controller on one side, and safety instructions on the back side there. And then here are your decals if you wish to make the flash rocket look flashy. So in that first packet with the rocket equipment, you'll have the rocket tube, you'll have the nose cone, you will have 3 fins that go on the back end of the rocket. You'll have your parachute along with the string that the parachute is attached with. You will have a rubber cord that helps to keep the nose cone attached to the rest of the rocket during its descent. And then finally, you'll have the engine mount and the appropriate items that go with that, including a small, narrow cardboard tube. And we'll go ahead and open up the plastic here for the engine. There's a warranty that's given in here. All right. So that's more paperwork, of course. The engine and back end of the rocket comes in a number of pieces that are designed to snap together to make the assembly much easier than if you needed to use glue. So the only thing you should really need in terms of equipment, other than the scissors, of course, Potentially, if you need to make something a little wider because it's loose, you can wrap some masking tape around it. Alternatively, if something is too tight and you need to shim it down or thin it out, you could use some sandpaper. I picked up a bunch of it for my class, just in case anyone should need that. So looking at the instructions, we want to be sure to follow those instructions step by step. Make sure we have all of the equipment for our rocket. So according to the instructions here, we should have the 3 tail fins, which we do. I should open up the package that they are in so I can get them out. Here we are with our 3 tail fins. There's the shock cord ring, which has a launch lug in it. So here is the shock cord ring. This little item on the side is the launch lug. You can see it there a little better. You have a front ring and a front bulkhead. I need to make sure I get the right rings because there are several of them here. Front ring and the front bulkhead, which you can see has a inner and outer radius there. There will be 3, well, we have the 3 tab fins. There are the pipe details, which there are 3 of those that help to attach the fins to the body of the rocket. There are these fairly narrow pieces here. There's your rear bulkhead and your base ring, as well as your engine cap. The engine cap is going to be this item here, right? The rear bulkhead is shown here. Relatively narrow ring with an inner beveled piece there. Then you have your engine mount halves, which are fairly obvious. There are these 2 big plastic pieces here. So I think I've covered all the different parts that I have sitting in front of me. And the first thing we want to do is assemble the engine part, the back end of our rocket. So we first want to get the narrow tube. The shoulder fits outside tube for part D, which is your back end bulkhead, rear bulkhead. And then the front bulkhead on part F will go on the front end of that. Okay, so we have the 2 bulkheads. That's the front end. And this appears to be the rear end, I believe. And so it looks like step 1, what you want to do is just put those 2 pieces snapped into place on the red cardboard tube here. Now on the front end, the inner ring will go inside of the tube, and on the back end, that inner ring goes on the outside of the tube. So just be aware of that when you're putting it together. You'll use those 2 bulkheads to line up with one of the 2 parts of the engine mount. So insert into part A with the pins as shown. Align ridges from the bulkhead with the corresponding grooves in the engine mount half, and then alignment tabs will align with the notch. Let me first make sure if there is a difference between the 2 engine mount halves. One of them has pins that will go into the holes on the other one. So the one we want is the one that has the pins, okay? So that will be this piece here. And again, those pins, just to show you, are located here, 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 and here. So on the front bulkhead here, there's a little notch which I've lined up with one side of this engine mount. The bulkhead itself will go into the grooves at the top of the mount, and this will be the side that has a longer open space here. The back end, that bulkhead will go into the grooves near the bottom, and there's a much smaller amount of space down there. All right, continuing on, I noticed one minor mistake I made when I was putting the inner tube inside this engine mount. That alignment tab that's inside of here should go into the notch that's in the center of this plastic piece here, rather than on this edge. Then you want to make sure you get the correct fin. There are 3 different fins, one of which has a single alignment notch here with a hole in the middle. This is the fin we want. We want to put it on the right side, aligning it with the notch on here. And so it should go in like this. Then we want to grab our L, which is the pipe detail, goes on the opposite side of the mount. So this particular one is the one that's shaped like this. It's a single one. The others 2 are identical but different from this. And that will go on the other side. All right, so there you can see the fin, and there you can see the pipe detail. You're then going to snap the other half of the engine mount, which is this piece, the one where you have the holes, into the pins on this half of the engine mount. So you need to line things up carefully. I think I've got it. So you align the pins in the holes. They don't seem to be held together very tightly, though. I guess that's what the rings are for that we're about to put on. Right. Got that. Okay, so one of those 2 rings is a little tab on it that goes into the notch on the side of the rocket, and when it's in there, it should hold things snugly. And then the other ring, presumably, will go right on top and slide all the way down. So that now finally seems like a nice stable piece. Took a while, but I think we got it all put together. So one of those 2 rings has that little alignment notch that'll go on the back end. The other ring is just a ring with no notches on it that you slide over these 2 pieces, these retractable notches on the front end of this assembly. And then the last part of the back end assembly is to snap the remaining fins and their pipe details into place. What do you know? 120 degrees apart. Okay, a bit of a trial and error. You'll note that the notches on those fins and on those pipes are not symmetric from top to bottom. There's a specific orientation. So you sort of have to line up the pattern of wider and narrower notches on each. Do make sure that from your original fin, which is, I have to figure out which is the original one, it's this one. from your original fin, you'll notice that the two pipes will go on the notches that are closer. So here's the first fin that goes in. The pipe, one of them goes here, and the other one will go here. And then the two further sets of notches are where your other two fins are going to go into. So that is how you assemble the back end of our rocket. So with that, the next step is installing our shock cord into this into the tube. So that goes into part N, right? Insert trimmed end of shock cord P into the small slot at the forward end of tube N from the outside of the tube. So one thing you want to do, you'll notice that the two ends of the shock cord are flat there. You sort of have to make one end of that a little bit tapered initially. So what we're going to do, we take our scissors and we're just going to sort of slice a little bit off here. So you make a sharper tip. So you see that there. So one end is going through the tube. The other end you want to tie a knot into. And then pull this out until the knot is up against the edge of the tube there. So that gives me my shock cord for what happens when the nose cone is ejected during the flight. What we need to use, there are two notches close together. The rip cord, the shock cord, goes through those and not through the bottom notches. So going back to that step, the small slot is the one I want to use for this. So again, I've got my shock cord. I've got two slots there. This one is where I want to slide the shock cord in. Let's see if we can pull that straight through. There we go. Okay. So place the shock cord inside the tube for the moment so that we can get the other parts lined up properly. Then place the nose cone over the front end of the tube. Now we go ahead, and that does seem a little better. So we take the cord holder, place it over here. Again, we place this over the knot in the cord there. And then rotate this around. And now we want to connect the body of the rocket with the engine mount assembly. And then snap the slots into the tabs on that assembly. So now we have on here two slots on opposite sides. They're going to attach to the two tabs on here. So we will slide that into place. And it should hopefully snap in. I believe it has. Fairly snug. And the next step is to put together the recovery system of the parachute and the shock cord. We'll take the nose cone out. We'll pull the shock cord out the front end again. We've gone ahead and opened up the package with the parachute and its cords. And I believe on our nose cone assembly that this piece here should either be snapped off or just moved out of the way. That piece is now fallen off, and you can see a gap there. Like we pass, okay, I think I got it. So there are 3 strings attached to your parachute. And if you take those 3 strings, it looks like you take them, you pass them through that gap, and then take it and wrap it around the around the parachute. So we'll pass these 3 through the gap here. All right. And then this we have to be careful of. We want to make sure that we get the open space for each of these 3 strings, right? And through there, you pass your parachute through. All right. And in doing so, it should provide a knot that keeps the parachute firmly attached to the nose cone. All right, so I think I did that correctly. We will learn that on Monday when we launch this thing. Now, the all-important thing that makes sure the rest of the rocket comes down with the nose cone and the parachute is the shock cord also goes through that little gap, and then you have to make sure it's very firm and snug, and they recommend using a double knot. So I will go ahead and do that, again with the tapered end of the shock cord, pass it through that gap, give me enough slack so that I get the ability to, that's 1 knot. And then here is a double knot, right? Just make sure it's nice and firm, okay? Getting there, surprisingly enough. At this point, should you choose to do so, you're encouraged to apply the decals onto the fins and onto the body. The decals we have here, you have the flash decal, then you have sort of the lightning bolt type decals here that go on each fin. The flash decal will go on the body. Let's see if they recommend any particular location for it. They also have advertising for the company with these estes decals. But if we want it to sort of look like the rocket on the box, you've got your flash decal, you've got these decals that you put on the fins, you've got some estes decals if you like. So let us see how well the decal process works. So the flash decal, just going to be, there we go, just taking the paper with it, which is so typical of me. So here's the decal, and then we will wrap one end. This is me, the way I have to do it, because my 2 hands are simply 1 hand too few to do this properly without messing it all up, right? So let's see if this will work. All right, so we've got decal, which is roughly about as good as I can expect to do it myself, which, to be perfectly candid, is not very good. But I tried. So it sort of wraps around the base here. You can see if I hold it really close that it's all sort of not flat lying on here. Fortunately, we're not dealing with high performance rockets because this would be a source of drag if it was moving very fast. The other 3 decals I could probably do a little bit better. So fins, here's one of these. Let's see. Those are not as hard. I'll use the 3 of those on one side of each fin, and then I will use the estes decals for the other side of each fin, just to throw that to do it. Okay, so you can see I put that decal on one side of each fin, and then on the other side of each fin, I will put this estes decal. Shameless plug for the company. There's one. There's 2. Not very straight. And so lo and behold, I'm nearly finished putting it all together. Remains to see how well it will fly, but we'll get the chance to see that on Monday. So here are my decals. Yay. Here's the body, the nose cone, my parachute. And then the last step would basically be in time for the launch. There is one remaining piece I see here. That is engine cap piece part M. Just want to make sure it wasn't supposed to include that on any of the previous things. It looks like the engine cap somehow magically appears at one point, even though they never tell you to put it on. I suspect this engine cap has to be removed to insert the engine, and then it gets put back on when the engine is in place. But the engine cap and the back end of the rocket, there are notches, so you'll just basically put it in there, maybe twist it into place. All right, so you can twist this around and remove it to insert an engine, and then put it back on and twist it into place, and it'll stay nice and firm and keep the engine inside, which is a good thing because you don't want the engine falling out once you've ignited it. That would probably not work too well. So lo and behold, I believe I've actually got the rocket assembled. The only thing that remains at the launch site, besides loading up the rocket engine, is properly folding up the parachute. Before you put the parachute in here, you'll have a few sheets of the recovery wadding. I have purchased that, and we'll be picking that up for us on Monday. You'll put a few sheets in there. You then fold up the parachutes, and what they recommend in the instructions on that. Recovery wadding down 6 to 7 squares they recommend. You then fold the parachute, pull it. Okay, so you pull it like this, and then you sort of fold it over like this, and then fold one side into the middle, and the other side into there. And then this is sort of what gets stuffed down the tube. You wrap the cord, the parachute cord, around the parachute, probably not too tightly. Place it in the tube with the recovery wadding. You place the shock cord with the inside there as well. Wrap the lines loosely, it does say. I will rewrap this prior to the launch, of course, but just to show you the process and what the final product is going to look like. And I might trim the shock cord part that is here at the top. But then, finally, once everything's been stuffed down the tube there, lo and behold, we have ourselves a rocket. And hopefully I put this thing together correctly. It seems reasonably sturdy, right? It does sit on my table here. You can't quite see it, the camera angle I have. Last step for that will be getting it ready for launch and then launching it. So that is probably the bulk of the process of putting things together, but we do have one other component that we are going to want to build, and that is the launch platform. So let me get out the instructions for our Porter Pad 2 launch pad. It comes in here. I don't think this will be quite as challenging to put together, shall we say, as was the rocket itself. Let's open up the plastic bag here with our scissors. Here is our launch controller. Here are the 3 legs for our launch platform. And here is the, as they call it, the blast deflector plate. Actually, I'm going to get the central piece out first. And then the blast deflector plate. This, ta-da! Okay, blast deflector. And more empty plastic bags for the garbage. So, we also, of course, will have our launch rod, which comes in here. I think this will be easy to assemble, or at least I certainly hope so. I'm not going to play games with plastic, I'm just going to use my scissors. There we go. More garbage. Join the launch rod pieces together and drop one end repeatedly on the concrete floor until the joints are tight. Well, I guess I'm going to need a concrete floor at some point. These pieces are, you just pull them off. They don't stay on. Okay, so you've got 3 pieces, one of which has a tapered end that will be inserted into the other pieces. Hopefully, if I can figure out which end is up. It can't go into that end, so it's going to have to go into this end. So hopefully, just sort of push them together as much as possible. And then later on, we'll drop it on concrete, apparently. Go outside and do that. Similarly for the other part. So there's one piece that has these tapered ends. That'll be the centerpiece. The other 2 pieces have holes on one end, and the tapered part goes into those holes. All right. So this is the launch rod that will hang vertically in the stand, and that the launch lugs here should go through. Hopefully, didn't actually check that. Let me check. to make sure this would work, right? So, needless to say, it won't do this, but that is how it should go. So these should be aligned, these launch lugs. Okay? Sand the joints in both ends smooth if necessary. So if necessary, we do have sandpaper for that. But for the moment, I'm going to put that off to the side. Attach the launch stand off and attach the legs. Attach the launch rod and the blast deflector plate. Okay. More parts to be removed with tape. They've got them in. So the central part of the launch platform, you want to carefully take off the tape from that, discard the tape. Inside of that, you will find a few pieces of importance, no doubt. You'll have this piece that has a ribbon attached. It's first prize, I guess. This piece has a screw that can be loosened, which allows it to orient different sized holes at the top. Not sure purpose to that necessarily. Let's see if we can figure this out. Slide blast deflector plate over the standoff stem. The standoff stem is this little cone-shaped piece. Turn the standoff stem 1/4 turn until it snaps into place. Okay. Let's see if this is made in China. Alrighty. So this will go through the central hole. You'll then basically turn it quarter of a turn so that it's now in place. Attach legs to your launch pad hub. Top of the legs will be even with the top of the hub. It goes like that. Okay, you just slide it into the notch. Similarly for the other two, you just take it, you slide it into the notch. And then for the third one, you slide it into its notch. I don't think there's any preference for which one goes through which notch, but you'll have this as your base rod. We tighten the wing nut before launch, but for our purposes, we'll keep it tight. All right, assembling this, you insert the launch rod into the hole here. Okay, so you want to make sure the small hole, not the big one, okay, is the one that's at the top there. That's what the key is. You need the wing nut to be loose when you do this. That makes sense. And then you can slide that into that smaller hole in the top. Yeah. And then tighten. Assume you want it. So when inserting the rod in here, you'll loosen the wing nut, insert the rod as far as it'll go, and then tighten it up so that the launch rail is nice and rigid. And then finally, you just slide the launch platform and the blast plate down the rod. before a launch to protect things is you put the cap on top of your launch rod so that it will look as follows. So there's the top of the launch rod there. All right. And there's your launch platform along with the rocket. And now when you're ready to get set up to launch, you get your engine installed, you make sure the parachute and the recovery wadding is in there, you remove the cap from the top, you slide the rocket down, making sure it gets attached to the launch rod correctly until it reaches the bottom here. And finally, on the launch controller, you'll attach the clips to the engine, to the appropriate igniter. We'll do a countdown. You'll press the launch button, the engines will ignite, and your rocket will fly up some 100 feet or so, I think, with this engine. And a successful recovery will indicate the successful conclusion of your model rocket project of class. So with that, I'm going to conclude this demonstration video, and we'll have it available so that you can put your rockets together prior to our class on Monday at 11 a.m.